Allah is the one, the one, the one, the one.
Dear brothers and sisters who are watching, due to the COVID-19 situation, we have no live audience here except for the very hardworking and diligent brother who's helping with the technicalities. So I'm gonna have to practice this skill of looking very natural in front of all these cameras without human beings in front of me. But inshallah, today's topic, anchor yourself in actions, sounds very abstract. But it's actually a very relevant idea to all of us. Last time when I shared here at MCHK, I talked about the order of revelation of the Quran, and we very briefly talked about the major themes of Makki Surah and the Madani Surah and the difference between them. And we discussed that in the Makki period there were several major themes, and one of them was the training for Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how difficult and challenging this mission of prophethood is. So he had to mentally and psychologically and strategically prepare his messenger ﷺ so that he can cope with all of the challenges and difficulties ahead of him. So in the early Makki period, many of the surah were actually directly addressing the Prophet ﷺ, teaching him and equipping him with the skills and abilities that he will need later on. So today, inshallah, with that as a background, let's start by going a little bit deeper into that one aspect, the training process for Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So how was he trained? Like, what was the content of this training? What did Allāh Azzawajal enable him to understand or to practice? So before we go into the training process for Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I want you to recall the modern training workshops and courses that you see all the time on YouTube advertisement, right? Whenever you open a YouTube video, there's always like normally an Asian guy. To me, I think it's based on the audience, but normally someone will be like, hey, I just made a 7-figure e-commerce business on Amazon and you should do the same. Follow this course for 7 days, I'll teach you how to do it. There are like tons of advertisement like this that brag about how easy it is to make a lot of money within a short amount of time, and all you have to do is to click on the link and they will teach you, they will train you how to do e-commerce, or there are other life coaches, how to communicate, how to be an entrepreneur, how to be successful in the workplace, all kinds of coaching and instructions. But when you actually look into the curriculum structure, when you actually fall prey to these traps and sort of get a feeling of what it is, you will see that all of these training courses and workshops or whatever it is called are basically a collection of information. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of ideas of how you should think, how you should perceive certain things, about understanding how a process works, or how a system is established, or how a structure is put up, or how to basically position yourself. It's a lot of ideas and information without too many practical implications. Basically what that means is you watch these videos maybe for 20 hours, 24 hours, you maybe paid $100 to watch these videos, and in the end you will be left still confused, as in, like, what do I do then? Okay, I know that Amazon works this way. I know this is how to start an online store, or this is how I sell products. But what do I do? Like, where do I start? So this is the problem with all of these trainings and courses online. They have a lot of information, but very little, very limited, practical implications. Very little advice for action. Now compare that with the training that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for his messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Think about the early Makki surah where Allāh Azzawajal addressed His Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. For example, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها المدثر, O the wrapped one. And then what? قم فأنذر, stand up and warn. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ وَالرُّجَلَ فَهْجُرْ. Right? All of these are actions, umur, commands for action, very immediate action, very clear action. Right? Stand up and warn, and glorify your Lord, and purify your clothes, and stay away from impurities. Right? So it is so you can see the difference here, you can see the contrast here. The training that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was very action oriented, was very actionable. You know what to do. Similarly, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, O covered one, qumil layli illa qalila, stand at night except for a little. Even, you know, the amount of the time was specified, right? Nisfahu وَيَنْقُصْ مِنْهُ قَلِيلًا, half of it, or you can reduce a little bit from half of it. So subhanAllah, and Allah Azzawajal basically started all of these speeches to the Prophet ﷺ with commands, with action advice, with what you should do and what you can do and how you do it. So this is the difference. The Prophet ﷺ was prepared by knowing what to do. Before the information. There was information, as we discussed last time in the Makki Surah. There were a lot of description of the Day of Judgment, right? فَإِذَا نُقِرَ فِي النَّاقُورِ, you know, when the trumpet was blown, فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ, that is a difficult day, etc. And then the visions and the images of the Day of Judgment. But all of those came after the commands, after stand and warn and pray and purify yourself and do this and do that and stay away from this and stay away from that and don't do this and don't do that. So action before information is what we witness, is what we see in the Sunnah of Allah, in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared His Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. This is one thing we notice, action before information. And even, you know, if you look into it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to pray at night, for example. Or even the first ever command, iqra, read. But then all of these commands, you know, were given without even specifying a reason. Allah said read, and he didn't even say why you should read. He said stand and warn, he didn't say why. He said, you know, pray at night, he didn't say why. So subhanAllah, this shows us, you know, the Muslim mentality or the Islamic mentality, which is, you know, action is something that will help you understand. It will help you grasp and comprehend the information. If you only look into the information, if you only think theoretically about the reality of the word, the information will not really benefit you. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to command the Prophet ﷺ with many actionable advice before giving all the information. So that's the first observation we make. The second observation we make is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in several places told His Prophet ﷺ to take things slowly and steady. لا تحرك لسانك لتعجل به. Do not rush your tongue to read the Quran. Slow down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, إِنَّا نَحْنَ نَزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ تَنزِيلًا. Indeed, we have sent down upon you this Quran gradually, step by step. وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. Recite the Quran gradually, steadily, slowly, with composure. So this is the second you know, recurring theme that we find in the early messages to the Prophet ﷺ. Take things slowly, do it little by little, improve yourself day after day, don't rush, right? Don't set unrealistic goals. So this is another thing that is very, very different from the modern training workshops we see, because the modern advertisement you see all the time is, I'll help you master this skill within 30 days, or all of those, you know, workout apps. 30 days you can become like Chris Hemsworth or whatever, Iron Man, you know, muscles. So this is the difference. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't emphasize the speed, rather He emphasized the consistency, the persistence, the graduality of your improvement. To keep doing something is much more important than to achieve it in a short amount of time. So now bear these two observations in mind. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded His Prophet ﷺ to act first, before a lot of information came in. And number two, he commanded him to take things slowly and steady and to grow and to improve with a with gradual process. So there's a Turkish scholar by the name of Abdullah Sahin. He's an academic scholar. So he wrote a book about Islamic education, and in this book he mentioned, based on his observation and research, two of the most missing elements in modern Islamic education. Two of the things that we need the most for our Muslim children. He said number one is critical thinking, and this does not mean criticize the Quran or the Sunnah. This does not mean to criticize revelation, but rather to be critical about circumstances, to be critical about situation, to have a critical understanding of how to apply the revealed knowledge. This is something we're missing, right? We have a lot of Muslims who have a lot of scripture knowledge. They have memorized ahadith, they know the Quran, but oftentimes they don't know how to apply them properly. They are, unable to differentiate the intricate details in situations. And this is what really differentiates a student of knowledge from a scholar. A scholar is not only someone who has a lot of knowledge, but a scholar is someone who knows how to best apply that knowledge to the given situation. He will analyze and critically select the best approach to knowledge. Anyway, that's the first thing he says we're missing, critical thinking. And then the second thing that he thinks we're missing is experiential learning. And what that means is, we have not really experienced most of the things we know. Whereas, look at the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and his Sahaba. Whenever there was a new piece of knowledge revealed, it will immediately be transformed into action. Some kind of things that they will do individually or collectively. For example, when alcohol becomes haram, they started pouring out their alcohol in the street, right? When, for example, when warfare was permitted, the Muslims started preparing for war because they knew now they have to fight fi sabilillah. They need to be ready for it. So this is the second thing we're missing in our time. So we have so much more access to information and to knowledge. You go to Quran.com, Sunnah.com, and you search for keywords. You can so easily get what you want, and you can so easily quote it to someone that you're debating with, and just slap him with the hadith or slap him with the ayah and try to win a conversation. But we have very, very limited experience with knowledge, with the Quran and the Sunnah. So if you again relate this back to the observations we made earlier about the training process of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command him sallallahu alayhi wasallam to pray at night before even telling him the benefits of prayer? Actually, just stand and pray. And Allah Azzawajal didn't even, all the ayat about how, inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta, that, prayer is a timely duty among the believers. How, inna Qur'an al-fajr kana mashhuda, the Qur'an of the Fajr time is witnessed. Or how inna salata tanha anil fahsha wal munkar, how, prayer prevents evilness and shameful behavior. All of these were later. The benefits of salah, the command of seeking help by salah. All of these were later. In the beginning, it was very simple. Allah said, stand and pray. Do it. Just do it. Experience it. Experiment by yourself. Try it. See what it does to you. See how you feel by doing it. And this is, this is the pedagogy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wants you to have a very first-hand, personal, experience with the action before you even evaluate and talk about the theories and the benefits of an action. So when you act upon something personally, when you have a very first-hand experience with an action, it will help you better appreciate the information. It will help you better absorb and internalize the information. So for example, when you have prayed a very sufficient amount, and we have prayed regularly, just as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was taught to do. And then Allah revealed an ayah about the benefit of salah. All of a sudden you can relate. I've felt this before. I've felt the tranquility of prayer. I've felt how it prevents me from evil behavior. I have experienced how salah, relieves my burden and guides my decisions and recharges my energy and helps me remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the ayah comes, أَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ, establish prayer for my remembrance, you understand. It doesn't need much more interpretation. You can just use your experience to understand what it means. So this is why action is very important. It helps you appreciate information. When I was reading the book Amusing Ourselves to Death, written by Neil Postman, it's not really a book about criticizing amusement, right? It's when you read the book, you find that it's actually a discussion on how the way we perceive reality has changed due to the invention of television. Back then, this book was written in the 1980s. There was no social media at the time. There was no smartphone. But the author was already worried about the television culture, the TV culture, because he gave a very, he gave a very detailed discourse on this shift. But basically he said previously, before TV, the culture was a culture of typography, the culture of written words, basically. And when you read written words, you are forced to think logically. You are forced to use your logical faculty, to use your rational faculty, to think about the premises of an argument, the evidence of an argument, the logic of an argument, whether it makes sense, and you will certainly test it with your life experience. So that's the culture of typography. But then once the TV is invented, once graphics became the major source of information, we no longer read about the word, we see the word. Or actually we see representations of the word, not the real word. We see images crafted with agenda to show you a certain way about the word that the one who created the message wants you to perceive. So now when this shift happened, he mentioned a very important word in the book called information action ratio. What does information action ratio mean? He gave an example. If I remember correctly, he said, in the 1800s or even 1900s, before the invention of TV, people read newspaper in the morning at breakfast. They wake up, they read the newspaper. But what they read in the newspaper will have a very, very practical influence on how they act that day. Because, for example, when they read the weather forecast of that day, they will decide whether to bring an umbrella or not. Well, we still do this now. But they will also read in the newspaper that the price of oil, for example, is cheaper today. So, the person might decide, okay, today I should buy more oil because it's cheaper, it's a good bargain. Or, the newspaper will tell you there has been a major accident with the railway, so he will decide to change his mode of transportation. Basically, what this means is that the information back then was closely linked to actions to be taken. Whatever you know about the word will convert to something you do about the word. So back then, the information action ratio was small, or actually to be better understood, the action information ratio is large, meaning a large part of information will transform into action. But now we have a TV culture, and then after the TV culture, we have the social media culture, we have the Instagram culture, Facebook culture, we have now the YouTube culture, and what that does is it significantly increases the information ratio. You have much more information with much less action. It fragments knowledge, fragmentalizes knowledge, it trivializes knowledge. Neil Postman also called this now that culture in the news programs. Right now, when you watch news, you can sit in your sofa and watch news for 3 hours, and after 3 hours, there's nothing you can do or will do about the things that you've learned in the news. right? So the Know That culture is they have segments, okay, a 10-minute segment about some stupid thing that Donald Trump did today, and then the news anchor will insert a commercial, and after the commercial, the news anchor will come. Now, this is an image of the explosion in Lebanon, and then a 10-minute segment, and after that, now this is what's happening in Xinjiang. We have grasped a new footage of this Uyghur Muslim after 10 minutes. Now, this is the basketball match that happened last night between Houston Rockets and Los Angeles Lakers. And, James Harden did a very good job mastering 39 points. And so what this does is it makes you feel all of these things are unrelated, and it makes you feel it has nothing to do with you. It's just segments of information presented for your entertainment, for your amusement. Right? So the information ratio is much larger, or to put it another way, the action information ratio is much smaller. You don't do anything about the information you get. You seem to know a lot, but knowing so much didn't change anything about your life. And this will cause a lot of problems. Number one, it actually subconsciously gives you a sense of loss. So you spend a day and you feel like, what have I done today? Or, sometimes you feel, what should I do now? Where should I go now? What's going on? What's happening? What should I do tomorrow? Where am I going with my life? You have this sense of loss. You have a very small sense of control. You feel like you are not in control of your life. You feel like so much is happening in the world, and you are like a puppet. You are not really in charge of yourself anymore. You're just being led somewhere. That's one problem. Another problem is it desensitizes us of, things that we should be sentimental about. When the Lebanon explosion happened, obviously, people, it almost has become an obligation for people to repost and share all of these videos and information, and then you just move on to your football match, or you move on to your samosa with your families, and you don't do anything about it. For most of us, we don't do anything about it, and you don't feel bad. Like, it has nothing to do with me. I've already shared the post. What else do you want me to do? What else do you expect me to do? And that also causes desensitization. The next time something happens even near you, a'udhu billah, but if something like that happens in Hong Kong, you still feel disconnected. You don't feel that's something related to you, or that's something that deserves action from you. So this, very, very distorted information-action relationship, this information-action ratio caused by the TV culture, or the, let's call it, social media culture. The media culture makes people very miserable nowadays. There's a sense of loss, a sense of disorientation, just a general sense that you're not in control anymore. And you feel like there's nothing you can do about things. And this also starts to creep into our deen, into our religion. Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah, he recorded God knows how many ahadith. I mean, this man, some records say he had memorized 1 million ahadith. So God knows how many ahadith he recorded. But he said that there is no hadith that he recorded except he acted upon it first. Every single hadith, even if there is a narration that the Prophet ﷺ relieved himself, went to the bathroom somewhere, he would relieve himself there before he recorded this hadith. If there's a narration that the Prophet ﷺ sat under a particular tree, he would sit under that tree before he recorded that hadith. SubhanAllah, the action information ratio is almost 1-to-1. Whatever information he got, he put it into action. But now, we learn about a hadith, we learn about a dua, we learn about, a sunnah, and then we're like, yeah, it's beautiful, alhamdulillah. And then you don't do anything about it. We know so many more dua than even maybe some of the Sahaba. There are some Sahaba who met the Prophet ﷺ once, maybe heard one khutbah from him, and never met him again. But then whatever they heard in that one khutbah became a lifestyle. They started living it, and every day. But now, we have so many lectures, we have so much information, but we appreciate it, but we don't really act upon it. We like it, we love it, we find it beautiful, but it's not really in our life anymore, right? For example, there's a hadith about the dua you should say before, when you leave your house. You're supposed to say, Bismillah, tawakkaltu ala Allah, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, in the name of Allah. I have put my trust in Allah, and there's no power or might except Allah. And this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever says this upon leaving the house, a voice يقال له, a voice will be said to him, هديت وكفيت ووقيت, you have been guided, and you have been protected, and you have been sufficed, you have enough for the day. But how many of us actually do this on a daily basis when we leave our house? How many of us actually consciously say this dua and appreciate the meaning and actually feel that I have entrusted my affairs to Allah and I will be safe now because I said this dua? And I totally believe the promise of the Prophet ﷺ that because I said this dua, I am now protected and guided and sufficed. We don't really have this kind of strong relation with the knowledge anymore. So this is the problem, and this is something that we need to correct, because our deen is a deen of action. When Islam came, it didn't come to only transform ideas. It came to transform people by those ideas. It came to change behaviors and actions. So that's why the early Muslims, they didn't have the strongest military. They didn't have the best economy. They didn't have the best government. Clearly, they were surrounded by empires and civilizations that were much stronger than them. But how come within just a few centuries they became the leading civilization in the world? Because they didn't let the revealed knowledge be knowledge only. They made those knowledge actions, change in the way they act, change in the way they unite, change in the way they live their lives. So, so when we start bringing, our deen into action, we will, inshallah, see those kind of changes again. Once I went to Egypt, and there was a famous scholar called Sheikh Usama ibn Abdul Azim, and I went there and I was with a friend, Egyptian friend, and he said, bro, you should ask him a question because whatever you ask, you're gonna benefit from the answer. I said, I can't think of a question right now. He said, just, whatever, make up something and ask because you can benefit from his words. I said, okay. So I asked a question and he gave me a very good answer. And then I've asked a follow-up question. And then he said, this is not a worthy question. It's not worth answering. And I was like, subhanallah, this response is better than answering my question. Because the difference is this scholar, Sheikh Usama, he evaluated the question and he decided that this piece of information is not beneficial to you. So it's better for you not to know it. It's better for you not to have this information right now because you cannot benefit from it. You cannot transform it into action. So this is the kind of wisdom we need. We don't only need people who have a lot of knowledge. We need people who know, what knowledge to gain and where to apply and how to utilize. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, for example, this is a famous hadith, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, it's typically translated as Allah will not burden a soul beyond what he can bear, beyond what it can bear. But us'a, it comes from wasi'a, which literally means to encompass, to surround. So you can also translate this ayah by saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not burden something, will not burden any soul beyond what he encompasses. So what this means is you don't really need the knowledge beyond your reality. You don't really need all the information about a rocket, if you're not an astronaut. If you're not going to ride that rocket, you don't really need to know how much fuel it consumes, what's the top speed it runs about, what's the velocity when it exits the atmosphere, how long does it take for it to rotate around the earth. That's trivial information. You don't really need that. And when you seek information for the sake of seeking information, there's no end to it. You will never have the information that exists in the world will always surpass the amount of time or energy you have. So لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not burden you for not knowing something that you don't need to know. Is that understood? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not blame you for not having the knowledge of something that you are not involved in, so to speak. So for example, if you don't know about how the election happens in the U.S. If you're not a U.S. citizen, that's totally fine. There's no problem. If you don't know, all the drama within, Egyptian politics, if you're not an Egyptian, it's fine. I'm a Chinese, and there are so many things I don't know about, Mohammed Morsi, the president, or the current president, or what happened between these two presidents, or, all the protests that happened. It's okay. I will not be blamed for not knowing this, because it's beyond my wusa, it's beyond my, area. It's beyond my the area that I encompass. So there is actually a Chinese saying that we used to be reminded by very frequently by our teachers when we were in high school. It's 两耳不闻天下事，一心只读圣贤书. It means basically your 2 years, literal translation, your 2 years should not hear about the things happening in the world. You should focus your heart on reading books of the righteous predecessors, or books of the good people. It doesn't mean that you should never know about things happening in the world, because otherwise why do you learn, right? Obviously, actually if you look at Chinese history, people learn to become politicians. That's the first priority. They take exams and then they work in the government. So obviously at one point they will be involved in things in the world. But what this saying it means is, when you are studying, when you are a student, when you are accumulating knowledge, at that stage in your life, it is better for you to be focused and not know about so many things about the world. Because again, recall the information action ratio stuff. You know so many things about the world, while not being able to do anything about it, it only makes you feel miserable and makes you feel worthless and useless and helpless. It doesn't really give you a sense of accomplishment or comfort, right? It reminds me of a hadith. Once a person came and asked the Prophet ﷺ, Mata sa'a ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah, when is the hour? When is the day of judgment coming? When is the hour? And the Prophet ﷺ answered by asking another question, Ma a'adadta laha, what did you prepare for it? In other words, I'll rephrase this conversation. This person asked, give me some information about the hour, the day of judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ said, show me some action that you have prepared for the hour. So this person said, what do you know about the hour? The Prophet ﷺ basically replied, what have you done for the hour? So this is the mentality we need to have. We should always focus more on action. We should always be more concerned about action instead of information. It doesn't mean that you do things without knowledge. Of course, you have to act based on knowledge and based on guidance. But it means that you should have action-oriented knowledge. Whatever information you seek, you should have action in mind. I want to do something with this information, with this knowledge, with this hadith. So what did you prepare for it, right? And there are so many, education has become a business and an industry, as I said last time. There are, so many advertisements about education program, or even universities. They will constantly tell parents that by enrolling your children into our institution or into our university, we will expand their horizon, right? Join our course to expand your horizon, to expand your vision. I would argue, actually, as Muslims, that it's high time we restrict our vision, we restrict our horizon. I think, if you understand what I'm saying, you don't need to see so much all the time. You don't need to know so much all the time. If it's not translated into some beneficial action that, help you or others, then the horizon is a waste of energy. The so-called horizon is a waste of time and energy and mental power, and even your emotional reserve. So, if you have ever ridden a camel or a horse, you know that those horse owners, oftentimes they would put some kind of a blockage next to the eyes of the horse. Or the camels. They would basically block the eyesight of the horse or the camel so that they can only see the front. You know why? Because you can try this. those animals, they have eyes on two sides, right? If you don't block their eyesight so that they can see, the horizon, they will go in a very disorganized fashion. If you don't control them, if you leave them be, they'll go left and right, and then sometimes they'll go back. They have no sense of direction, right? Because they see everything and they have so many desires and they have maybe so many conflicting ideas. But once these owners put some blockage next to their eyes so that they only see the front, what do? They keep going forward. They go to the very strict direction. And this is, I think, what we should do to ourselves to discipline ourselves. Restrict your horizon a little bit strategically with a goal in mind, with an aim in mind. Focus on one direction. Focus on a particular target. And that way you will reach your destination faster, more effectively. And you wouldn't be lost. A lot of people are lost these days. They try something for a few days. They try another thing for a few days. Oh, recently this is a new trend, I should follow that. Oh, today, this stock rose a lot, maybe I should buy that. Or, there are so many new things coming up every day, and people constantly change their focus or change their direction. They are like a horse or a camel wandering off in the desert, and they will not get anywhere. As Muslims, we need to be goal-oriented, target-oriented, and action-driven. So, to wrap up, of course, it's our habit to end with an action plan, something that we can do. So these are some practical advice. I still have to-do list, and Dr. Jordan Peterson, Professor Jordan Peterson, a Canadian psychologist, he also recommended maintaining a to-do list, and a physical one. Not, there are a lot of apps on your phone nowadays where you can put in the things you do, but he actually recommends a written down to-do list. Like, I still have this every day. I just put down the things I need to do, and when I've done them, I cross them out. And when you cross them out, when you actually put a line and to indicate that I've done this, there's a very strong sense of accomplishment and a sense of control. Okay, I planned to do this and I've actually done it, alhamdulillah. When you cross it out, I've done something and I know I have taken a step further towards my goal. And then that way you are motivated by yourself, and then you always keep yourself in check. So that's number one advice. Keep a to-do list. Actually, it's better to have a physical, either a notebook or even a whiteboard. At your apartment, put a whiteboard before you leave your house. Write down the things you need to do today, and then when you've done them, cross them out. Number two, the slogan of Nike: "Just do it." And this relates back to the early Makki period. As I said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded His Prophet ﷺ to do something, oftentimes He said, "Do it," before He explained why you should do it. "Qum fa'anzir," stand up and warn, and He didn't say why. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, glorify your Lord. He didn't say why. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, cleanse your clothes. He didn't say why. Those why came later, but do it first. Just do it. Experience. See what changes you will witness in your life. And with that experiential knowledge, with that experience and experiment, you will understand better all the why and how and when and where. All of those questions will be answered by just doing it, by experiencing it. Right? So once you've learned the dua, make that dua and try to see the change in your life because of that dua. When you've learned a sunnah, something the Prophet ﷺ used to do it, try it, right? And see the change in your life and be very conscious of the differences that occur because of that new action that you've brought into your daily life. So that's second advice. Just do it. Don't hesitate so much. Don't think too much before you do something. A lot of successful people, when they're interviewed, people like Mark Zuckerberg or all of these CEOs or creators of a new company or of a new phenomenon, when they're interviewed and people ask him, how did you come up with this idea, or how did you manage to establish this industry? What did you have in mind? Oftentimes they would say, I didn't really have a very clear blueprint in my mind when I started. I started with something vague. I started with, just a rough idea. And then as I started practicing upon it, it became fine-tuned by the day. Every day I will, try out new ideas, try out different plans and see what works, see what doesn't work. Conan O'Brien also talked about this, the comedian, the talk show host. He said, he changed his TV format a few times, and he said in Oxford Union, young people often think of us, the so-called successful people or the established celebrities. He said young people often imagine or assume that we've figured everything out, but that's not the case. Conan said, there are still many things that I haven't figured out, that I'm still wondering about, that I'm still constantly thinking about. So, many things don't turn out the way it is because the doer had a very clear vision in mind, but sometimes you have to just experiment with it, right? Start somewhere and embark on the journey, and then every day you will gain some new insights, and that will help you orient yourself and sort of optimize your plan, but eventually you will get somewhere. But if you are stuck at the beginning point and thinking too much about what should I do now, what should I do 10 years later, what should I do this and that, if you don't even start that journey, you will definitely not get anywhere. So that's the second advice. Just do it. If you have an idea, start doing it. It's better to start than to have a perfect plan. Perfection is not something that you can expect at the onset. Perfection is something that you achieve gradually by leaving out imperfections. Number 3 is to have reflection every day. At the end of every day, before you go to sleep, think to yourself, what have I done today? And how did I do them? What have I done wrong? What have I done right? What should I do more? What should I do less? What should I repeat tomorrow? What should I avoid in the future? Think about all of these questions so that your actions are not in vain, so that your actions become resources that will, incrementally and accumulatively help you act better in the future, so that every day you're better than who you were yesterday because of your actions. So use your actions as a very reflective resource to help you plan for the next day. So every day before you go to sleep, ask yourself, what did I do today? And all the related questions. So I just want to end by a hadith. It's a hadith Qudsi in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Abu Dharr. It's a long hadith. In this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically addressed all human beings by saying, Ya ibadi, O my slaves. And he said 10 things, 10 sentences starting by Ya ibadi. And all of these 10 sentences are actually very, very important for us to understand the concept of Tawheed. So, you should really search for this hadith by Abu Dharr in Sahih Muslim. It's a hadith Qudsi, but inshallah I will just share the last sentence in this hadith, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ibadi, O my slaves, innama hiya a'malukum uhsiha lakum. Indeed, it is only your actions that I record for you. Right? Allah will not, basically, you are only accountable for your actions. You're not accountable for your thoughts. We already know this. Allah will not punish us for something we think about. But Allah will hold you accountable for any actions you do. So, إِنَّمَا هِيَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ أُحْصِيهَا لَكُمْ. I will only hold you accountable or, record your actions. ثُمَّ أُوَفِّيكُمْ إِيَّاهَا. And I will only compensate for you or pay you based on your actions. Right? فَمَنْ وَجَدَ خَيْرًا فَمَنْ وَجَدَ خَيْرًا فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهِ. So whoever finds goodness, on the day of judgment, if you find reward, if you find a good outcome, فَلْيَحْمَدِ اللَّهِ, praise and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having guided you to do good actions, for having given you the opportunities of good actions. وَمَنْ وَجَدَ غَيْرَ ذَلِكَ. And whoever found other than that, if he found a bad result, a bad record, فَلَا يَلُومَنَّ إِلَّا نَفْسَهُ. Then he has no one to blame except himself, because it's his action, it's your own action. So I hope this hadith or this sentence gives us a very clear concept of how important actions are. It's okay if you don't have a lot of good ideas. Allah will not hold you accountable for ideas. Allah will not reward you for your ideas, or actually intentions will be rewarded, but not, theories or information, trivial information. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will surely reward you for every single action you do. إِنَّمَا هِيَ أَعْمَالُكُمْ. It is only about your actions. So I close with that hadith. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to improve our actions, to be anchored in our actions. This is why I called this talk Anchor Yourself in Actions. Because when you go after information and theories and abstract philosophies, sometimes you get lost, sometimes you feel destabilized, you feel like you're floating in air, you don't know where you're going. But when you do things, you feel a sense of stability, you feel you're anchored, you feel like you are being held in place, you feel like you have a base, right? That's why, I forgot a very important hadith. It's narrated by Hudayfa radiallahu anhu. He said, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حزبه أمر صلى. Whenever the Prophet ﷺ was distressed by something, something burdened him, something made him sad, صلى, he prays. Very simple, right? He had an emotional problem. He used action to heal that, to deal with that. So this is the kind of attitude we should have. Whenever we have a problem in life, immediately we should think, what should I do? If you have an emotional problem, follow the Prophet ﷺ, pray, right? Don't seek comfort by words, don't seek comfort by those gurus and YouTubers and motivational speakers, although I am a motivational speaker on YouTube, but do something about it, right? Our deen, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, is to immediately put yourself into some very immediate and very practical action. So you're sad, pray. You need something, make dua, ask Allah, right? You want knowledge, read, or watch a lecture, study, do something about it. So inshallah, I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make us people of action, anchor ourselves in actions, keep us firm upon our deen because of our actions, reward us for our actions, guide us in all of our actions, and may Allah Azzawajal give us endless opportunities for good actions, so that because of them and because of the mercy of Allah, we can be safe in the hereafter and be rewarded in the hereafter. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allah is the one.